Hello, and welcome to Tales After Midnight. Settle in, turn the lights down low, and prepare yourself, because tonight's story is not a legend, not a rumor, and not a campfire tale. It is a case drawn from fragments of history, stitched together from court murmurs, plantation ledgers, and eyewitness accounts that time tried to bury. Before we go any further, take a moment to tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. An enormous amount of work goes into uncovering real historical stories like this, and your support helps keep these forgotten truths alive. Welcome to my channel. Tonight's story takes us deep into Natchez, Mississippi, in the year 1847, where a single enslaved boy became the center of a mystery so dark it would tear two powerful families apart. This is not folklore or exaggeration. It is a case pieced together from hushed court testimonies, plantation records, and accounts long hidden beneath layers of silence. The story begins quietly, almost without notice. In the spring of 1847, when a slave trader's wagon rolled into Natchez under the heavy Mississippi sun, the town was already steeped in wealth, secrecy, and cruelty. Grand homes overlooked the river. Families were built on cotton and blood, and enslaved lives were treated as property, counted like tools or livestock rather than as human beings. Among the chained men and women crowded into that wagon was a boy no older than 9. He was thin, barefoot, and strangely silent. While others cried, pleaded, or stared ahead in terror, the boy simply observed. His eyes followed everything: the horses, the guards, the wide houses lining the road. There was a calm about him that unsettled even the trader escorting the group. He had no recorded name when he arrived. The papers listed him only as male child, strong, obedient. He was purchased quickly by the first family. The Whitmores, a respected and deeply religious household just outside Natchez. They believed the boy would be easy to shape, young enough to forget where he came from, and old enough to be useful. But from the moment he stepped onto the Whitmore property, something felt wrong. The dogs refused to come near him. One of the horses reared violently as the boy passed, snapping its reins and nearly killing a stable hand. The overseer laughed it off as coincidence, but the enslaved workers noticed something else. The boy never flinched, not at shouting, not at the crack of a whip nearby, not even when thunder split the sky at night. He would simply stand still and watch. Inside the Whitmore house, the mistress insisted the boy be kept close, assigning him duties indoors rather than sending him to the fields. She later told her sister that there was something unsettling about him, and yet she felt drawn to keep him nearby, as though compelled by something she could not explain. He moved silently through the halls, completing tasks before being asked, appearing in rooms without anyone hearing his footsteps. Servants whispered that he seemed to know things. When someone would fall before symptoms showed, when tempers were about to explode, when bad news was traveling up the river. Within weeks, small disturbances began. Glassware shattered without being touched. Candles went out in perfectly still air. A family Bible slid from a table and fell open again and again to the same passage, a verse about judgment. The boy was always nearby when these things happened, though never directly involved. When questioned, he answered politely and softly, never defensive. His voice was calm, almost comforting, which somehow made it worse. The enslaved workers began to avoid him, giving him extra space, whispering prayers as he passed. One older woman claimed she heard him speaking at night, not crying or shouting, but murmuring quietly to someone who was not there. Another said she saw him standing at the edge of the property at dawn, staring toward the river as if waiting for something to arrive. When asked what he was doing, he replied, simply listening. The Whitmores dismissed the rumors. They believed fear bred foolishness. But then came the first incident that could not be ignored. The master's youngest son fell violently ill after playing near the boy in the yard. Fever took him within 2 days. Doctors blamed infection, the heat, the air, anything except the truth no one wanted to say out loud. The boy had been sitting nearby when the child collapsed. He had not touched him. He had not spoken. He had only watched. After the funeral, the house changed. Laughter vanished. The mistress withdrew into herself, claiming the walls felt closer, the air heavier. She became convinced the boy brought misfortune, and yet she could not bring herself to sell him. Each time she tried, something intervened. Buyers withdrew. Paperwork disappeared. The boy suddenly fell ill and then recovered just as quickly. It was as if he could not leave. That was when the second family entered the story. A neighboring plantation, wealthy and influential, requested to borrow the boy temporarily. His calm demeanor had impressed visiting guests. The Whitmores agreed, relieved to see him gone, unaware they were passing something dangerous into another household. When the wagon carried him away, several enslaved workers swore they heard a strange sound echo across the fields. Not a cry, not a laugh, but something in between, carried faintly on the wind. No one in Natchez understood it yet, but that quiet arrival, that nameless boy stepping down from a wagon, had already set something in motion. 2 families would be ruined. Reputations would vanish. Deaths would be explained away as coincidence. And at the center of it all would be a child who never raised his voice, never raised his hand, and never once tried to run, because whatever followed him was already exactly where it wanted to be. The first sign that the boy carried more than simple unease came quickly, and it was devastating. The Whitmore family, despite their early pride in owning such a quiet and obedient child, began to notice fractures forming within their household that could not be explained by sickness or ordinary bad luck. It started with small, unsettling incidents. Silverware vanished from the dining room and was later found shattered in the garden. A chest of freshly folded linens was discovered torn apart, as if by unseen hands, though no one admitted to touching it. At first, the Whitmores blamed careless servants, sudden gusts of wind, or simple accidents. Then came the death no one could dismiss. The youngest Whitmore son, a boy no older than 8, who had been healthy and strong just the day before, collapsed without warning. The enslaved boy had been sitting quietly nearby, resting in the shade of the front porch, watching the other children play. When the child fell, doctors were summoned immediately, but they found no infection, no fever, and no trace of poison. His heart had simply stopped. The Whitmores were broken by grief. Mourning filled their grand home. But beneath the sorrow, whispers began to move among the enslaved workers. The boy had been there, silent and still, and something about his presence seemed connected to the sudden death. Fear, which had once been only discomfort, deepened into true dread. It did not stop there. Soon after the funeral, strange disturbances began surrounding the family patriarch. At night, he claimed to hear whispers coming from empty rooms. Candles snuffed themselves out without being touched. Windows rattled violently when the air outside was perfectly still. Objects shifted inexplicably. Doors closed firmly at night were found standing open by morning. Chairs tipped over without any sign of being moved. What began as subtle irregularities grew into daily occurrences, filling the Whitmore household with an oppressive sense of doom. Everyone walked carefully, afraid to be alone, afraid of the boy's quiet stare. The local physician who had examined the boy after the first death recorded in his journal that there was nothing medically wrong with him. The child was healthy, strong, and alert, yet the doctor noted something unsettling in the stillness he carried. Animals reacted strangely in his presence. Dogs barked the moment he entered a room and refused to approach him. Cats hissed and arched their backs. Even the horses shifted nervously when he passed. At first, these details were dismissed as superstition, but over time, even the most practical minds began to wonder if the boy carried more than misfortune. The second tragedy followed within months. The Whitmore's eldest daughter, once lively and full of energy, fell suddenly ill. Unlike her brother, she did not die quickly. She lingered for days, her condition worsening without explanation. No doctor could diagnose her illness, and every remedy failed. In her brief moment of clarity, she would stare at the boy with wide, terrified eyes and whisper that he was always near. Within a week, she was gone. The Whitmore family was left shattered, reduced to fragments of what they had once been. Friends and neighbors offered condolences, but suspicion quietly took root. Word spread that the boy had been present during each death, always watching, never intervening, never shedding a tear. The enslaved workers began to notice a pattern that the Whitmores either could not or would not admit. Wherever the boy remained, misfortune followed. Yet he never acted violently. He never struck, pushed, or spoke harshly. He simply existed, quietly and almost invisibly, while everything around him unraveled. People began to avoid him. Some crossed themselves when he passed. Others whispered prayers under their breath. Even the household servants, hardened by years of suffering under plantation life, admitted that there was something in the child they could not understand, something ancient, something aware, far beyond ordinary human nature. The fear reached its peak when a neighbor visiting the plantation fell suddenly ill after spending time near the boy. He was carried out in the middle of the night, pale and struggling to breathe, and recovered only after leaving the property. The Whitmores could no longer ignore the possibility that the boy was somehow connected to the growing chain of deaths and illnesses. What disturbed them most was that he never cried, never smiled, never reacted to the tragedies that seemed to follow him. In every visible way, he was an ordinary child, and yet his presence marked disaster wherever he remained. By the end of the year, the Whitmore household was nearly empty. Friends had distanced themselves, fearful of unexplained death. The surviving family members spoke in hushed tones, avoided the boy's eyes, and still could not bring themselves to sell him or remove him from the land. It was as though some unseen force bound him there, tethered to both the soil and the family he had already destroyed. Their grief was joined by helplessness. They had become witnesses to something beyond their understanding, something that defied reason and logic. The tragedy of the first family became a warning to others in Natchez. Rumors began to spread of a boy who carried death quietly, who watched without emotion, and whose presence alone was enough to tear a household apart. Neighbors whispered in fear, yet when he was near, he was barely noticed. He was always still, always observing, always silent. The boy had arrived without spectacle, but the consequences of his presence were catastrophic. What began as an ordinary transaction had become a disaster no one could explain, leaving the Whitmores shattered and the community deeply unsettled by the strange pattern of death that seemed to follow a single, nameless child. The story grew even more disturbing as it moved beyond the Whitmore estate and reached the neighboring plantation of the Carters, one of the wealthiest and most respected families in Natchez. The Carters were known for their strict order and rigid control. Their property ran on precise routines, firm hierarchies, and unwavering discipline. Everything in their world had structure, and anything that threatened that balance was treated with suspicion. They had heard the whispers about the child of the Whitmores, though many dismissed them as grief-driven exaggerations. Still, curiosity lingered, mixed with unease they could not fully ignore. They requested that the boy be lent to them temporarily, claiming it would give him broader experience working in another household. The Whitmores, desperate to distance themselves from what they feared but could not remove, agreed. They had no idea that they were passing catastrophe into another family's care. From the moment the boy arrived, strange disturbances began again. At first, they were subtle. A vase would be found slightly shifted from where it had been placed. The sound of footsteps echoed through empty corridors. Animals behaved strangely, refusing to stay calm in his presence. The Carters dismissed these signs, believing the boy was simply unsettled in a new environment. Then came the first event that could not be ignored. A fire erupted in the kitchen in the middle of the night. No one had been near the stove. The flames seemed to rise without cause. Though the fire was contained before it spread through the house, a young servant became trapped and suffered severe burns. Throughout the chaos, the boy was found sitting silently in the parlor only a few feet away, watching as everything unfolded. His calm, almost unnatural stillness disturbed everyone who saw him. Soon after, illness began striking members of the household without warning or explanation. One of the Carter daughters complained of dizziness and nausea, and within hours was confined to her bed with a fever no doctor could identify. A visiting cousin grew weak overnight and died quietly before sunrise, though the family physician could find no physical cause. Each event seemed to happen when the boy was nearby, though there was never any proof of direct harm. The pattern was becoming impossible to deny. Misfortune followed him, while he remained passive, silent, and eerily composed. The house itself began to feel different. Doors slammed shut on their own. Lamps flickered when he passed. Shadows appeared to move in corners where no one stood. Adults whispered among themselves in growing panic, wondering if the child carried some kind of curse or unseen burden. The enslaved workers, who had watched him carefully from a distance, began refusing to enter certain rooms when he was present. One elderly woman was heard muttering that the boy carried something heavy in his heart and avoided him completely. Even those who did not believe in curses felt an oppressive weight throughout the house, a tension that could not be shaken no matter how hard they tried. The fear reached a breaking point when a member of the Carter family was found dead under circumstances no one could explain. The man had been healthy, active, and strong the night before. In the morning, he was discovered lying quietly in the parlor, eyes open, face pale, his expression completely empty. Panic consumed the household. Curiosity turned into terror. Anyone who came near the boy felt an unexplainable coldness settle in their chest. People began leaving the estate whenever possible, seeking refuge with neighbors or in town, unwilling to remain in a house that now felt marked by tragedy. Visitors noticed the tension immediately. Rumors of the boy spread rapidly throughout Natchez, moving from plantation to plantation. The same pattern was repeated in every whisper. Sudden deaths, unexplained illnesses, mysterious fires, animals acting in fear, and a silent child always nearby. Even those who had never seen him spoke of him as something to be feared. People began avoiding the Carter estate entirely, afraid that merely being close to the property might invite misfortune into their own lives. The boy, however, remained unchanged. He showed no anger, no fear, no sadness. When questioned, he answered politely and simply, but his calmness only deepened the unease around him. The Carters found themselves trapped between responsibility and terror. They could not force him away. They could not explain what he was. And with every passing accident, every unexplained death, the sense grew stronger that he stood at the center of something far beyond human understanding. Eventually, the Carter family was shaken beyond repair. Friends and relatives stopped visiting, and their once respected household became a place people mentioned only in hushed voices. Fearful of becoming the next victims of the strange curse that seemed to follow him, servants refused to attend to him directly, quietly avoiding any room he entered, and the boy, still silent and composed, watched everything unfold without interference, his presence alone enough to unnerve every living person around him. By the time he left the Carter household, whether returned to the Whitmores or sent elsewhere, the damage had already been done. Reputations were stained, family members were dead, and an entire community had become convinced that some force beyond human understanding traveled with a small, silent child. In Natchez, his story became a whispered warning, a child so ordinary in appearance, yet so extraordinary in the devastation that followed him. No one could explain why two prominent families were destroyed while the boy remained untouched. And no one could say whether it was coincidence, misfortune, or something far darker. His presence had permanently altered the lives of everyone who crossed his path, leaving behind a mystery that would haunt the town for decades. The boy's influence did not stop at isolated deaths or tragedies. It spread outward like ripples in still water, reaching far beyond the households he had lived in. After the events at the Whitmore and Carter plantations, the surrounding community began to notice unsettling changes. Farmers, traders, and neighbors who had once seen the boy sitting quietly on porches or wandering the fields began reporting strange experiences of their own. Animals in the area grew restless and unpredictable. Dogs growled at empty air. Cats arched their backs and hissed at shadows no one else could see. Livestock that had never shown fear before refused to cross certain paths or enter familiar spaces. It was as if the boy's presence carried a weight that disturbed the natural order itself. The townspeople grew increasingly uneasy. Rumors spread quickly, telling of a child who brought death simply by being nearby, whose silent gaze could chill even a grown man's soul. Some believed he was connected to the devil. Others claimed he was a form of divine punishment for the sins of the plantation owners. The boy himself never acted violently. He never struck, cursed, or threatened anyone. He merely existed, calm and observant, as if aware of a power he neither sought nor needed to hide. And yet, wherever he went, calamity followed. Even those who tried to explain everything through logic and coincidence were forced to confront patterns that made no sense. His influence began reshaping the social fabric of Natchez. Families who had once been close to the Whitmores or the Carters started avoiding them entirely. Invitations to dinners vanished. Visits to town became rare. Cooperation in the cotton fields ended abruptly. No one wanted to risk being near the boy, fearing that even casual contact might bring illness, accident, or death. Markets grew tense as people whispered in corners about who had seen him and what tragedy had recently struck the household. Fear transformed into isolation, and the boy, still silent and composed, became a living symbol of dread. Within the plantations, fear was nearly paralyzing. Servants and enslaved workers who had once moved freely through the estates became hesitant to enter certain rooms, or even pass by the boy. One elder woman said she avoided the dining hall completely if he was present, whispering prayers under her breath to protect herself and her family. Even experienced overseers admitted they were unsettled by his calm, deliberate manner, describing a sensation of being watched and measured by something far beyond human understanding. His quiet observation carried an authority no adult dared to challenge. The boy's influence was not limited to physical tragedy. It reached deep into the minds of those around him. Children in nearby households spoke of nightmares in which the boy stood silently in doorways or at the foot of their beds. Adults confessed to sudden waves of anxiety when they thought of him or recalled brief encounters. Some claimed that even saying his name aloud caused discomfort, leading people to speak of him only in whispers or avoid mentioning him at all. In this way, his presence disrupted not only daily routines, but a very sense of safety and normalcy throughout the community. Merchants and travelers passing through Natchez carried stories of the boy to other towns along the Mississippi River. Each retelling added to his growing reputation as a bringer of misfortune, yet the boy himself never changed. He remained polite, quiet, and observant. No one could explain why disaster seemed drawn to him while he remained untouched. Medical examinations offered no answers. Clergy came to bless or cleanse him, only to leave shaken and confused, unable to account for the patterns they witnessed. The psychological pressure of his presence intensified with time. Families that had once been prosperous lived in constant anxiety, unable to carry out ordinary tasks without fear. Crops were neglected, businesses faltered, relationships fractured under the weight of uncertainty. Some began to speculate that the boy somehow absorbed or redirected misfortune, though no one could explain how such a thing might be possible. Others, guided by superstition, insisted that he could curse with his gaze or summon death with a cry, even though he never raised his voice. Whether the cause was natural or supernatural, the boy had become the point around which fear, uncertainty, and tragedy revolved. Neighbors tried to protect themselves by avoiding the plantations altogether, building both physical and social distance between their lives and the child. Yet, this only strengthened the legend. Reports of sudden deaths, unexplained illnesses, and minor accidents near his presence multiplied. Each new incident reinforced a belief that a curse followed him. Even families who had never met the boy changed their routines, limiting travel, keeping their children indoors, and avoiding any path that might bring them close to where he had been seen. By the end of the year, he had not only devastated 2 families, but had spread fear throughout all of Natchez. His social, psychological, and even physical impact was undeniable. No one could explain the pattern scientifically, spiritually, or logically. What began as the arrival of an ordinary-looking child had grown into a force that felt inescapable, reshaping the behavior and mindset of an entire community. His presence became a dark legend in its own time, an invisible hand of misfortune reminding everyone that some events and some beings could not be explained. The final development that forced Natchez to bury the truth came after months of growing fear and suspicion. By then, nearly everyone who had come into contact with the boy, from the Whitmores to the Carters and even distant neighbors, had suffered some form of calamity. Sudden deaths, mysterious illnesses, and inexplicable accidents had become too frequent to ignore. Rumors spread rapidly, yet no one dared speak openly about what they truly believed. It was as if acknowledging the truth would give it more power, as though speaking it aloud would grant the boy some unseen authority over the living. Still, curiosity remained, and a small number of determined individuals, including town officials and private citizens, sought to uncover what was truly happening. The first approach was medical. Doctors and scholars examined the boy, searching for a natural explanation for the deaths and misfortune that followed him. They found nothing. He was perfectly healthy, showing no symptoms that could explain the events around him. Children who spent time with him appeared normal until tragedy struck. No toxins, diseases, or physical causes were discovered. The more they studied him, the more baffling the situation became. Every unanswered question deepened the town's unease. At the same time, religious leaders pursued a spiritual explanation. Clergy visited the plantations with prayers, blessings, and even attempted exorcism, hoping to cleanse the boy or protect those around him. Each effort ended in confusion and fear. Candles extinguished themselves. Sacred objects shifted without being touched. Some priests claimed to hear whispers or distant cries in empty rooms. The boy never resisted, never reacted, and never acknowledged the rituals, yet his presence commanded the attention of everyone there. These events convinced many that his influence lay beyond both science and faith, an enigma the town was not prepared to face. The breaking point came when a respected local magistrate visited the Carter plantation to observe the boy's behavior. He was later found dead under circumstances as mysterious as those surrounding the Whitmore children. The magistrate had been in a private study, reviewing records, when a sudden crash was heard. By the time anyone entered, he was lifeless, with no sign of violence or illness. Panic spread through Natchez. It was now impossible to deny that the boy's presence coincided with a deadly pattern that could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. Families had been destroyed. Reputations had been ruined. The town itself felt as though it stood on the edge of something it could not understand or control. Faced with mounting fear and no explanation, the townspeople held a series of private meetings to decide what must be done. Publicly acknowledging the boy's influence was unthinkable. To admit such a thing would have caused hysteria and shattered the fragile social order. The decision was clear. The truth had to be hidden. The story of the boy would be buried, just as deeply as the memories of those who had suffered because of him. Families who had been affected were warned never to speak of what had happened. Witnesses were quietly silenced, encouraged to leave town, or pressured into forgetting. The plantations themselves became places of secrecy and avoidance. The boy was moved quietly, disappearing from public view, so that further calamity might be prevented. Even after he vanished from daily life, the legend did not fade. Those who had seen him carried the memory of his calm presence and the tragedies that followed. Stories continued in whispers, cautioning outsiders not to question what they could not understand. Some claimed the boy had been adopted by distant relatives. Others said he was sent far away, or that he left Natchez entirely. But the damage had already been done. Families were broken. Children were lost. A town was forever changed by the realization that a single silent child could influence life and death in ways no one could explain. In the years that followed, Natchez became a place where superstition and caution lived beside ordinary life. Parents warned their children not to wander near the old plantations. Neighbors avoided the subject entirely. Those who had survived the boy's presence almost never spoke of him. He became an unspoken shadow in the town's collective memory, a symbol of forces beyond comprehension, a reminder that some events defy all human understanding. In the end, the final realization was not about discovering how or why the boy caused misfortune. It was a recognition that the truth itself was too dangerous to confront. The town chose silence over investigation, secrecy over explanation, and fear over curiosity. Natchez buried the story not in the earth, but in the minds of its people. A cautionary tale of what happens when the ordinary collides with the inexplicable. The boy, his presence, and the devastation that followed remained a mystery, preserved only in whispers and fragmented records, ensuring that although his story was hidden, it would never be completely forgotten.